Ladies and gentlemen, I can honestly tell you I have no idea what was going on with that. For whatever reason, StreamYard decided it would not load. But I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Erudition Network. My name is Eddie Phillips. I am the CEO of the Erudition Network, and host of this wonderful show, this interactive history show that we do every Thursday. I wasn't with you guys last week, but I am back. I had to take a little bit of a break, but I am back. I am back tonight. If you are new to this program, this is the interactive Black History and Knowledge session. I do this session on Thursdays. My name is Eddie Phillips. I am a public historian, and I get on here every Thursday to discuss Black history and general knowledge with the masses. I encourage you to bring your questions. I encourage you to get on and we talk about our history. Sometimes we get a lot of people that will join us. Sometimes we don't get as many, but we do get people that go back and watch later. And I am greatly appreciative of the support that we have. This last week, I posted that I was canceling the interactive, and I forgot to put tonight. And I got so much feedback from so many people in chat and online. Who I didn't know were watching, that were like, oh no, but I'm not canceling the interactive. I just had to take a little bit of a momentary break. When you do this every Thursday over and over again, when you go over history can be pretty dark and it can weigh on you. And then with all of the other things that are going on in the world currently, it was just a lot to do. So every now and again, it's good to take a little bit of a break, a little bit of a sabbatical, and try to refresh your mind, So that's kind of what happened, and I needed it. So I'm happy that I was able to get that done. I'm going to give a couple of moments to see if anybody comes into the live session. We don't have anybody with us right now, and I want to see if we can get some people to connect. We started just a little bit late. I was having some internet issues. I restarted everything and brought it back up. I was hoping that it would resolve itself. So hopefully it has, and we will have a good productive session without a lot of freezing and different things like that, because it hinders the progress of what it is that we're trying to do here. But definitely wanted to make sure that we got everything up. There are so many things that are going on right now, and I know that sometimes history seems boring. It seems boring to folks, and that's fine. History doesn't always have to be so exciting, and and I know that when we go through school, a lot of people say, oh man, well, I've never really liked history. History was not my favorite course. It was always boring. I found nothing that connected with me. And what I try to do on this program is I try very hard to speak to the relevance of history and why it's needed and why it's important and why you should know it, especially as it pertains to Black history, because I think a lot of times we have neglected to understand or admonish our own history. And when that happens, we get lost in what's going on and we can't make a connection. It is so important to make a connection to your history and to who you are and where you come from and how you got here. It also makes it so that you don't get lost, right? You recognize these roadblocks that have occurred before and you're not lost in them and wondering, oh man, why is this happening this way, or why did this occur this way? And so I get on specifically for that. Tonight, since we have, I wanted to go over revision. um, because we're starting to see so much revisionism in our history. We're starting to see um, people um, writing history in the way that they want to. I think that that's that's a problem because when we do that, we lose the actual facts of history. We lose where things actually happen, how they happen, and the facts of it, and it kind of clouds our judgment, right? It kind of clouds our understanding, and we start to um, share history that is entirely wrong, right? And so I wanted to go in tonight um, and talk about that. I'm gonna send out a little reminder. We have nobody in here right now. And send out a little reminder. We weren't on last week, and I just want to send that on out there to folks to know, hey, we are live, and to join us. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. But I always try to do that. Um, but yeah, I want to get into this tonight, and I am, regardless of who's going to be on with us or not, we're going to get into this because um, we are having a lot of issues with people basically putting out history that's just I sometimes I don't even know where they're coming from, right? They're so over the top, they're so removed, and there are big names out here. I um 2 weeks ago I saw one of these gentlemen on a podcast talking about why we shouldn't worry about history. And I won't say his name, but the video's out there, and how, we should be learning how to fly drones, and we should know how to make medicine, and we should know how to. And I laughed when I saw that video because I said to myself, this brother doesn't realize that, in fact, that is in our history. That is in our history, right? And all of these things that he was talking about are historically a part of our community, who we are, what we brought to America. And yet still, he didn't know that. So what he put out was foolery. And foolery sounded correct to some people, right? It sounds good because you start saying to yourself, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. Why should we? Let's focus on what's coming up in front of us, and let's forget about and not worry about what was behind us or where we came from or what we've done. Because Black history is not important. You never hear people all over the world, despite whatever nation that they're in, you, if ever, let me not say never, but you would rarely ever hear someone say that their history is not important. People in other countries in Africa, in the Middle East, in some parts of Europe, they trace their history back generations. Unfortunately, a lot of African Americans cannot do that because of slavery. We cannot trace our ancestry back as far as we would like. But what that should not mean is that we continue to denigrate or throw away our history, or we pretend that it's not important. Because when we do that, we run into this foolery, into this problem that is affecting us right now. It's affecting us every day. A couple of months ago, me and Mike Wiley were joking. I was on their program, and we were joking about issue of people being on TikTok telling this ignorant lie that you could get to Egypt through the Grand Canyon. And I thought it was foolery then, and I think it's foolery now. But people believe that. They believe that. They thought that what this young woman was saying was actually correct. We're having a little bit of a problem here tonight. There we go. All right. I don't know why we're lagging a little, but we are. But I wanted to show this. This is one of the reasons why tonight we're going to talk about revisionism. So someone took a picture of the Grand Canyon, and you see the picture of the Sphinx. You're showing up in the background. What? Okay. I'm happy that you're here. Let me give the history of this, because this was some foolery of another level, right? What this is, and the reason why there is any connection between the Grand Canyon and Egypt as it is because of a man named John Wesley Powell, right? John Wesley Powell named certain places in the Grand Canyon after places in Egypt. Now, some people would look at that and say, oh, okay, all right. He gave Egyptian names to prominent places in the Grand Canyon as a reference, right? He did it because he thought some of them had a visual resemblance. He did it because he was a fan of Egyptian, study, right? He was a geologist, so he liked the idea of the rocks and different things and the colors. There are reasons why he did it, but there's no actual digging in through the Grand Canyon you will get to Egypt. But you see how revision can happen. Revision can happen when somebody doesn't go back and do the research that I talked to you all about a couple of weeks ago. When they don't go in and actually try to figure out where the information came from. Instead, they hear a little bit, and they run 1,000 miles with that little bit. So when they see Temple of Isis listed in the Grand Canyon on Google, right? Because these are names that have been attached to these different places in the Grand Canyon by John Wesley, right? They don't go and look up who named them. They don't understand why he did it, right? There is no actual Egyptian connection between the Grand Canyon and Egypt, other than the fact that Wesley, a geologist, John Wesley, thought that it would be really good to name these places this way so that folks would have some kind of an identifier. That's it. That's where the story started, and then the foolery took over after. Excuse me. But now, well, again, if you look at it and you say, man, that kind of looks right. But now we can also play around with images. You see it on social media all the time. We can manipulate something to look a certain way. But let's not get caught up into some superficial foolery that has nothing to do with what Egypt really was or really is, and is simply based off of somebody's idea 100 or more years ago. And we make it into something that it is not. It's foolish. It's foolish. You know, typically on this show, if you're new, when you watch this, or you're watching now, and you're new and one of the few people who are on, I would go into giving you all time to ask questions tonight, because I have a lot that I want to cover. I'm not going to do that. I'm specifically not going to do that because I want us to get through this information that I have, that I'm trying to bring up right now, so that we are all informed and on the same page. Give me a moment here. It's not acting the way I want it to. There it is. All right. Tonight, as I told you, I want to talk about revisionism, right? Revisionism. As always, one of my favorite things lately has been that I want to share a timeline here. And I'm going to share that right now, because it just makes it easier for me, and it gives you all a visual example. I mean, you could ask your question and maybe I'll answer it in chat later, but if you have any question, but you say you have none. So give me a moment here. Tells you this thing's been acting a little screwy today, but we're going to do this. All right. Here we are. Here we are. Okay. So what I want to do here is I want to blow this up about 120, right? So we can kind of navigate. All right. Let's start here. Right? This is from my notes here. So I want to talk about revisionism. What is revisionism? If you don't know, we face revisionism a lot in our history. It is basically the design of taking something and revising it to fit your particular narrative, right? To fit your point of view, and to give you an understanding or an attitude toward that particular thing in a way that you can get your mind lost. I named this episode Revisionism, but I also told in my advertisement, it's the things you have been taught, it's the things you've been taught to accept, and the things that you know, right? If you look at the idea of pre-Columbian America, right? Columbus discovering America is revisionism, right? We know that that is not absolutely true. We know that Columbus did not discover America, and that, in fact, there were people here well before Columbus. Rather you talk about the Native Americans, rather you talk about the Norse that sailed over here and others who had sailed. Columbus was not someone that was just new to what was going on. And we have evidence that there were some maps and some things that were there that Columbus used to navigate by. So you don't just sail off into the oblivion. He knew where he was going and what he was doing. The other thing is this lie that he came over here and brought education to the savage. That's not true either. That's another revisionism of history to explain the brutality and the evil that Columbus brought over in the understanding of the church, right? Because contrary to the popular belief of most, the Native Americans over here and the societies over here were well established and educated and bright. They were an advanced people. They were not a people of who were just lost over here, running around in loincloths as savages. However, this is what we have been told, and this is what we have been taught. And because we are taught this, we accepted this. We accepted this as a reality that we should not have. That we should not have. But when you look at the world as we see it, this as we call it, the Western education system, it has always fantasized this idea that people, everything came from one particular race of people. And that foolery has stayed with us. It has stayed with us. It is also of note that we understand too, and I'm going to put this is not necessarily in this part, is that when Columbus came over here, it is after the Spanish had pushed the Moors, the blacks, out of Spain. And when Ferdinand and Isabella united Spain after centuries of being helped through the Dark Ages by the Moors, societies were not savage. They were not just people living over here. I'm sorry, I'm all off the camera, off their own means, right? Without any understanding. They weren't the savage that we have been told that they were. But we have been taught to accept these things as a reality. And that is the falseness, right? And so as we talk about revisionism tonight, we're really talking about people who feel that their perspective of history is more important than reality, right? You look further down here, we talk about, in my notes, we talk about the Pilgrims, right? The Pilgrims and the idea that Thanksgiving was this wonderful thing and that they all came together. But that was a more complex history. When the Pilgrims arrived, the first thing that they did was desecrate Indian land, Indian burial grounds. From their own narratives and testimonies, they talk about how they found grain and things to live that were near corpses which had been buried upwards, and they went in and they took the tools and they took the material and the seeds and the food that was left there. And over time, the strife and anger between the Native American and the Pilgrims was huge. But we romanticize, we talk about it as if the Pilgrims were these wonderful people who sat down and ate with the Indians and everything was great. If you move further in time with the Monroe Doctrine, the Manifest Destiny, we start to find that the Manifest Destiny, which is important to put down for indigenous people in early American history, Manifest Destiny basically said that the Indians had no rights to their land. It was the document or the understanding that set the stage to remove land from the Native American. God wills it, as they said during the Crusades. It is our manifest destiny, our God-given right to take that which is not ours. That is what was taught. That is what is still taught. And when we look at the actual history and we try to teach the actual history, people revise it. You have folks in the country who want you to only accept the brilliance of manifest destiny. They only want you to see manifest destiny as something wonderful, when in fact it was not. And that is the problem. That is the problem. Click my wrong button here. Let's move on. Let's move down. Move down. Let's talk about, get closer to slavery. We are in a political season where folks are telling us that slavery is long past. Why do we dwell on it? Slavery isn't important. None of us were slaves. None of them were slave owners. I'm going to click my screen here for a second because I want you all to see me when I'm saying this. Let me make this very clear to you. Without slavery, this country could not have waged revolutionary war against the British and won. Without slavery, people would not have had the ability to survive. We know that from slave medicine, we know from exploration that Blacks, African Americans, Africans brought over to the Americas, helped to allow people to thrive, to be rich, to explore. They were willing to die for those people, those owners who they had been raised under. But the lie of slavery, the revision of slavery, as we're talking tonight, is such that we are made to accept certain things that aren't real. We are told to, in reading our history books, to see certain things not as they were at the time, but as we want to understand them in our time. And we have to do better about that. Yes, the thought process of, if I'm allowed to do it without any sort of information or immediate consequence, then it's not wrong. AKA, God wills it. And putting a thought to God that is not of God. Let's make that point too, Sean Anthony. But manifest destiny and the idea of falsifying of slavery are huge. So there are a couple of things that I noted in my notes here. Let's go. We're going to go, other than going from the top down, we're going to go from the bottom down. The nature of slavery in America, the myth of content African Americans in slavery is a lie. You know, the old Gone with the Wind myth, the old slavery, the uncle and the mammy sitting around, the uncle playing the fiddle and the mammy is helping with the kids and she's happy and she's content. We know from the slave narrative that this is not the case. We know from their own words, this was not the case. To enslave someone means to strip them of their humanity for chattel slavery, to take away any self-control that they have over themselves. How could you be happy when you can't even decide when you're going to clean, bathe, or feed yourself? You can't do anything outside of what the master wants without the possibility of penalty. If you sleep with someone as a slave, as a female slave, and you sleep with someone that the master did not approve, you risked being sent away, beaten, ostracized, or having that child and the child being stripped from you immediately, forcefully. There was no happy slave. There was no happy slave owner. That idea is a lie. But When did it come into play? It came into play after slavery, with people like Dunning, Charles Dunning, Archibald Dunning, Charles Archibald Dunning, who taught professors to teach this lost cause, happy South narrative to America and to put it in our school systems as we still see it today. You will find history books where they say, well, not all slave owners were evil, but slavery as an institution in itself is an evil institution. Let's go to the next one, the Civil War. This is a top revisionist idea in America. The lie that the Civil War was never about slavery. It was all about the state's right to do whatever it wanted to do, despite the fact that the Confederacy in their articles actually wrote that it was about slavery. But we've revisioned it and we've put it into our history books, and we've told ourselves that this is about states' rights. And you even hear people on the political campaign talk about, well, the Civil War was fought for many different reasons. There was one reason for the Civil War: slavery. The expansion of slavery. There have been multiple compromises, multiple presidents who had basically ignored to try to stop the spread of slavery. Slavery spread as fast as what we just talked about with Manifest Destiny. People were willing to die to keep people as slaves. They went to war with Mexico because they wanted to keep slavery. But when we blow off the idea that the major focus of the Civil War was slavery, did we get away from the idea of the ill treatment and mistreatment of blacks for centuries under the slave system in these Americas? If you cannot conceptualize or understand American chattel slavery, then you do not understand American history. You can't tell me that you understand it or that you can even go through our history in earnestness. But many don't. Last part, the cotton gin. We have this idea that slavery was, I've heard historians say it, oh, slavery was going away. And then the cotton gin. Right? Here's the thing. The cotton gin did push and increase the demand for slave labor. That is absolutely true. It helped to exploit because it became easier to exploit blacks. The fact of the matter is that the cotton gin was a huge impact on the continuation of slavery, but it does not mean that slavery was going away. It just meant more money could be made quicker through slaves and the use of the cotton gin. Now, when we look at this history, when we go through and we look at these items, we just need to understand that these are things that we've been taught. We've been taught these things. And we were taught these things for a reason, right? Because the thing was to keep us stupid, to keep us from asking questions, right? From going and understanding what was really going on, right? We revision things that make us feel better about who we are. But the truth is, We lie a lot, a lot. On my timeline, I wanted to show you all this issue of the Dark Ages. I'm writing a book on a medieval history, African history. And the idea was that the Dark Ages was a time when people didn't know anything. But what is also often lost is that that's not true. The fact is that in Africa, there were a lot of scientific, artistic, construction, cultural advancements that were then shared to the European. So when we talk about it being a dark age, we talk about it being a dark age as it aligns with Europe, not with Africa, right? And so that revision lie has stayed with people. Oh, the world was in the dark ages. It was not the world. It was not the world. It is significant that the Moors and Africans and Muslims came up to Europe and to Italy and to Spain and helped people to grow their knowledge. But there are lies that we tell, revisions to what has been put out for centuries to ignore the contribution of African Americans, of Blacks, of Africans. This next one I put in here because, man, it is a mess. Ancient Egypt's African roots. When you say that Egyptians are not African, you ignore the fact of where they are. You ignore the fact of how we say genetics work. You ignore the laws and the rules of law that have been put in place in Europe, in America, and throughout the world on what we conceive to be Black, white, or whatever, this idea of race. And so we apply race only when it is convenient for us. Egypt is a huge part of African history. To remove it and say that the people there are not African is foolish. It is as if to say fish are not a part of the sea. But we do it, and we've allowed it to be done. And you have to understand that Egypt didn't start when people from the north came into Egypt. And the fact that some of the leaders who came in were Caucasian or white, right, doesn't mean that everybody was in Egypt. And it disrespects the idea of the African in the Egyptian. It plays down the idea of their African history. But we see that a lot. We see that in modern times, the revision, the UN getting involved, people saying things that are absolutely incorrect. But they can do it because we don't know the history ourselves. And this is a problem. This is a problem. You know, I don't know of any, going back to what I spoke of earlier, of the gentleman saying we don't need our history. We don't need it. Because the truth of the matter is we need it more now than ever. We need it now more than ever. We have lost our way. And if we don't get back to it, if we don't really get back to understanding it, I don't know where we're going to go. We are losing places with the civil and things that we have established through civil rights. You can't even get people to honestly discuss history. And when you discuss it with them, you realize what they have been taught and what they have accepted is profoundly wrong. I'm hearing people tell me that presidential elections have no real effect on us. And that's historically wrong and proven to be wrong. Richard Nixon was president, and he was the first president to push the war on drugs, which we now know was a war on minorities, on blacks specifically, and remove black fathers, brothers out of homes. The compromise that allowed Rutherford B. Hayes to be president of the United States was done with the understanding that the Republicans would remove federal troops from the South. That presidential election was used to further the movement of the Second Klan and racist murderers who killed whole towns of black people. But it started with a presidential compromise. But you're not taught that. Most people don't remember the presidency of Rutherford B. Hayes. Neither do they care. Most people don't understand the significance of Herbert Hoover. You know, the president that was president at the beginning of the Depression. The man who was, before he became president, was a proponent of the Lily White movement, who wanted to remove the voting bloc from African Americans who could vote. The man who later became president, who told people, lean on your church and your God while they were dying from starvation. Policy does happen in the lower places, in the legislations of the states. But direction is given from the leader. Dr. King could go, and the SCLC could go march all around Montgomery and Birmingham. And they may win small wars, but it took federal power to pass the Civil Rights Acts that have helped to advance minorities of all levels, women, blacks, people of color. It was black people in the civil rights movement who removed the quota systems that were in place in this country and held intact by presidential decrees and Congress. Those same quota systems that would not allow Jewish people fleeing Nazism to come over here during World War II. And resulted in the death of millions. We have to know our history. We can't live in the revisionism. We can't live in the lie. And we need to stop telling ourselves that I know it when deep down you know you don't. So then we don't have men sitting on podcasts telling young Black men and Black women, your history isn't important. I don't know it, and look at where we are. Yes, look at where we are. Thurgood Marshall traveled all over this country. All over this country. In the 50s and the 60s, before he became a judge, defending Black people, pushing for laws, things that we are still facing today. Men being shot down with shotguns in the street. Folks busting in people's houses in the middle of the night and shooting under the decree of the state. And we lie to ourselves and say, oh, history don't mean anything. Why do you think our ancestors, those who have come before, died for the vote? Let me clarify. Died for your right to make a choice to vote or not vote. But they died for your choice because they weren't even given the choice. We are living in a revisioned lie, and it is the reason why I had to take a slight break, because the noise was becoming too much. The foolery was becoming too loud. We're questioning the color of a woman whose father is Jamaican, and we're allowing people to tell us who is and who isn't. You have conservative alt-right groups out here quoting the Dred Scott decision to say that Kamala Harris does not qualify to be president based on the Supreme Court's ruling of Dred Scott. And not understanding how foolish that sounds. But that's because it's not just one side. It's not just Black people who have been not taught proper history. It's all of us. But if you're going to try to invoke or use Dred Scott as an example, something that happened before the Civil War, then what does that tell me that people's mentalities are stuck in? What does that tell me? If you have to use Dred Scott versus Sanford to justify removing somebody after we've already had a Black president, where's our minds at? And here's the thing. I get very few invites now to talk about history. My time is limited as it is. But I noticed as I started to push back on people, as I started to tell folks, hey man, what you saying ain't right here. People pull back. I'm going to tell you from the heart. I don't get on Erudition to tell you these things, right, to hurt your feelings, to make you negative, to radicalize you. I don't get on here to say anything that is racist I'm simply going to give you a fact. And the fact is, we have to do better at our understanding of our history. I've been saying for the better part of 5 years now, before I was on Erudition and after, that we got to prioritize our history. We have to grow our knowledge and our understanding. That we spend so much time learning certain things that gravitate towards us. The idea of reading the Bible as a Christian and not knowing really where those places are that I'm reading about. Not understanding the history of the time period that I'm reading about. So that then I can go in and qualify what they were facing. But we don't do that. To be fair, history hurts you, then that it is not intended. However, it's also good because that means that you will not follow the same mistake because if history hurts or angers you, that you're more likely to learn from those parts of history. That means you can see the wrongs, and you should see the wrongs. I completely agree, Sean Anthony. To remove the stumbling block, to be smarter than what is being thrown at you, to not accept the revision. There are some standard revisions that we're now only starting to face. Columbus didn't find America. The founding fathers owned slaves, and they hid their love affairs with slaves. The Renaissance was not just based on Firenze and Italian people. It was inspired by the Moors. It was inspired by the Africans. It was inspired by those who lived in those environments along with those people and helped them to understand these ancient texts and understandings. But that is not what you have been taught. And so what we do is we continue down this foolish path of revision. We tell ourselves that the Native American was primitive. We tell ourselves that the African American was tend to be a slave. We tell ourselves all of this foolery. We worry about the Trail of Tears and how Andrew Jackson set the indigenous people on the Trail of Tears unconstitutionally. But we revision and forget that Thomas Jefferson had told the Cherokee and the civilized tribes, as they called them, to be civilized, own slaves, own land. And when they prospered, men like Andrew Jackson and white men said, no, you can't own that. You can't own all that land. And in order to take it, they kicked them off their land and they sent them to another place. We have to stop and really study and research our history. Go back, watch the last 3 or 4 episodes. I have spent so much time talking to people about how to actually do research. And I'm tired of people telling me that they do and they don't. They don't. We have to do better. You know, America, we always say, I remember growing up, people would say, America's a melting pot. And it allowed us to ignore that everybody wasn't in the pot. Everybody wasn't allowed in the pot to come together. And so we lied. We tell history as myth and fable. I've told you all this before, and we don't tell it as its factual truth, right? We don't tell the factual truth. And unfortunately, and I'm going to spend the last 5 minutes here, and I'm going to say something, my brothers who watch this, who are out here. We got to do better. It may anger you that I'm saying this when you watch this, but we got to do better. We should be leaders in our communities and our households and who we are. And a lot of us are pushing false narratives based off of hearsay, fable, lies. We have to be responsible for proper research, knowledge. And if our partners, our wives, our girlfriends are doing proper research, we can't dissuade them and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. There was a brother out here a couple of years ago, he passed away. That brother was out here talking about how Black women were failing. Black women are some of the most educated people in the country. And there are those out here who gravitate to a ghetto failure mentality. But that ain't all of them. And what we're doing is we're fighting against progress. We're fighting against knowledge. It's not about a presidential election. It's about our cultural understanding. We're failing. Every Thursday I get on and I teach history. There are other people who get on and they do Bible studies and they do workshops, and they're trying to educate us. And we're lying to ourselves and telling ourselves, no, I got it. And we're going down a fantasy road. We're searching for anything that will connect us to some truth and some fact without doing the work. Frederick Douglass was an autodidact. He was pretty much self-learned. But he was one of the most eloquent speakers in history. You have the ability to do better, to be better. We all have it, my brother. But I'm speaking specifically to the brothers out there, because white, Black, or whatever. Because if we don't do better, if we aren't honest, history is going to repeat itself. It's dividing us. It ain't dividing us on a cultural line. It ain't just Black and white. It's everybody. We put out some things that are so foolish. And it's obvious when we put them out that there is no research done in it. We got to do better. We got to utilize platforms like this. We have to utilize to understand better. Be willing to be wrong. Stop telling yourself that everything that comes out of my mouth is right without research, without study, without prayer. Because what we're doing is wrong. We're putting out lies and things that don't even have any truth, fact. I've heard brothers say that we're better off, that Jim Crow was good for Black folks because it kept the families together. I've heard Black men say, I don't mind going back to 1930 something when you were being lynched. I've heard people say that it's okay. I'm not going to go along with this politic or whatever this is because I don't believe in abortion. But your money and your finances, the things you buy, go in to feed the state, go in to feed the federal government, and it still funds abortion. So you going to give up your citizenship? What you can do is pray, study, get involved, encourage folks. We are preaching foolery out here. And unfortunately, the world, I'm not just talking about this election, the world. If you are a world traveler, you've been out of this country, you will know that the world watches America for good or for bad. And the things you do and the things you say and the things you co-sign to with non-logic, with non-study, with non-knowledge, with non-wisdom affects the whole. It affects the whole. You have a place to go to study, to learn. You have this program. You have others out there. Utilize it. Share it. Stop telling women that they can't tell you anything. Grow your knowledge. It's never too late to grow your knowledge and your mastery of who you are. God gives you that ability. Learn. I gave you the steps. Go back, watch those videos on how to do proper research. Message me. Ask a question if you want to find, am I doing this the right way? And if you feel you can't do it, you're not at that level yet, be willing to step aside and say, hey, you know what? I can't teach my kids this right now, but let's go to this person here and let's all learn together. Be willing. I'm going to close with this. A brother sent me, one of my Navy friends, he sent me a thing and he asked, when I said I wasn't going to do the program last week, he thought I was canceling completely. And he asked me, was I okay? That's the first thing he asked. And I was like, man, I'm fine. I'm good. And he said, but we need you, man. And I said, well, I thank you for that. But I'm okay. We need all of us. We need to learn. We need to grow. We need to stop ignoring our history. We need to stop accepting the revisionism that we've been taught. But the only way to do that is to be willing to be wrong and accept that maybe I'm wrong and grow from it. Grow wiser from it. Stop resending and putting out things that you have not researched. Stop participating in these lies. Grow your knowledge. And I promise you, our society, our country, our world would be better if we were more honest. Stop listening to people tell you that history is not important. Because whoever said that they are ignorant. That history can save your life. That history provides you knowledge. People lived a life to inform you, to teach you not to make the same mistakes. Stop allowing people to help you to make those mistakes. All right, I'll get off of my soapbox. I appreciate all of you who joined us tonight. Um, I will be back, God willing, next week. Um, but I definitely needed to take that break. Please get out here and if you have any questions on where do we read, what to study, where to go watch any of these old episodes of Eruditions Interactive, and I guarantee you we're going to give you some place to go, something to read. But you could start with my book, the book that I put out a couple of months ago as I get prepared for my second book. You can start with 101 Black History Questions Challenge. You can get that on Amazon or Lulu Books. But start growing your knowledge. Start being a part of letting our generations know who they are, so they're not lost or don't have no clue of who they can be. It's just that simple. Come onto the interactive on Thursdays, or rewatch it and leave your comments um, after the broadcast. I try my darndest to answer whatever comments that we get. Let's grow our knowledge. Let's be better. Let's be wiser. Let's be factual. But above all of that, let's be prayerful that there is some wisdom of God in our seeking of knowledge, so that we can grow in a right path. All right, I'm gonna get out of here. I thank you again for joining us, and until next time, until next week, I hope that you are blessed. See you then.